Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. This podcast is being sponsored by Get Loopy. On episode 41, you can hear the story of Isabel, the co-founder and CEO. Get Loopy, get a 20% discount off your first order. GetLoopy.com. Take it from the Iron Woman. Again, we have a very special guest with us. I don't know how many Ironman, how many marathon. We'll be finding out. We have Cherry on our episode today. Hello, Cherry. Maybe you give us the numbers first and introduce you a little bit. Who is Cherry who will be joining us here?
Well, Susan, it's nice to be on here. As you know, we did one Ironman actually together. I've completed 56 marathons and 17 of those were part of the full 140.2 mile full Ironman races.
Oh, wow.
And who knows how many shorter races there were a lot of fun along the way too.
Wow, that's a big number, 56 marathons. For the listeners, I mean, it takes a lot to finish. And first of all, I would say to train for a marathon, but how did you get into running? Maybe let's start there so people can relate. Like, where do people start?
In my case, there was an injury when I was about 35 years old where I broke my ankle. I was pretty much a couch potato. After the orthopedic surgeon repaired the ankle, he said, it might be a good idea for you to get active. A friend of mine said, come on, do a 5K. And I did it and I had a good time. And then my friend said, we did the New York Marathon. I had no understanding of what that meant. I didn't know how to train and I didn't train. I just, I guess I was young enough to muddle my way through it. And I guess ignorance is bliss in that case. Mm-hmm. I did it and I had such a good time. I met some great people. I began doing the marathon each and every year. Became kind of an annual event of things to do. Back in the 80s, there was a show, many of your listeners probably have seen it if they're old enough, called Wild World of Adventure, Channel 7. There was this race that no one had heard of called the Ironman. And there was this woman by the name of Julie Moss, who's now famous. You could look it up in the history books, who crawled to finish the race. And in doing so, finished second. And I saw the race and I said, someday I'd like to do something that challenges me that way. But I didn't do it for many, many years because I was busy, in my career with my family. And I was in many businesses, actually 9 different businesses over the years, all high-tech businesses and lasers and computer chips. Mm-hmm. And so there was a perfect marriage, frankly, between the athletic focus on a marathon and business. And the focus is very simple. In both, you need to prepare. In both, you need to think about what are the things you have to do to reach the ultimate goal, even though you can't reach it initially. Everything's incremental steps. Yeah. Every day, if you move closer to the goal, every day you accomplish some things towards that final goal. And then at the end of the period, you get there. And along the way, there are pitfalls, downfalls, things that don't work. And that's the parallel for me because no business goes perfect. No plan to run a business is perfect. And the same thing's true with training for marathons or Ironman.
Very wise. The other thing is also important that we try it out. If we don't try, we don't know. So your orthopedic was probably the best person to tell you get active.
Yeah, he was. In fact, I've been friends with him now for over 30 years. Fortunately, I've only had to see him a few times. But the Ironman slogan really says it properly. It says anything is possible. And if you realize that if you prepare, whether it's an Ironman, a marathon, or a 5K race, or just something else that you want to do in life, if you prepare, and you're willing to deal with obstacles, because there will be those. I have a saying that I'm sure have heard, because we know each other for a while. And so a number of my running friends know it as well. And the slogan is, weather is never a factor. And it's really more than weather. It's more of, there are going to be obstacles, and you have to be prepared that either adapt. You may adapt and say, I'm going to go slower, or I'm going to do a different race, and that can happen even in the middle of a race you're doing. You thought you were going to finish in 20 minutes, and now you're going to finish in 40. It really doesn't matter. The key is how you adapt and meeting your own personal goals.
And I know I've seen you in like Placid. I remember that was one year when they took the swimmers out when it was thundering and lightning. Remember that? And we were all waiting for you, and they say, nobody is coming out of the water anymore. And we're like, what? But Jerry is not here yet. So I think it's one thing to be a spectator, but then how was that for you when they said, get out of the water?
It was a memorable moment, because I had looked up just before they were pushing us out of the water with the kayaks and everything else to get everybody out. And I saw a flash of lightning, and I went, this doesn't look good. And then, of course, in Ironman, they don't stop the race if it's lightning and torrential rain when you get on the bike. It was a little bit of a wind, and the rain continued. And I remember going up a hill and said, I didn't realize I had entered a swimming competition on the bike, because there were waves of water coming down the hill as I was going up. And I went, oh my goodness. I was prepared to adapt mentally. It's not a physical thing. In fact, if you train properly, whether it's a marathon, a half marathon, a 5K, or any other sporting event that you really want to do, when you get to the actual event, that day is a fun day. That's the day where you're already prepared. And if things go wrong or don't happen the way you just have to accept it and go forward. I guess I'm one of the rare people who've gotten invitations to both Boston Marathon and the Hawaiian Ironman and Kona, the World Championships. The year I was invited to Kona, for example, that year, I made a mistake. I tried a sport that I'm not very good at called tennis. And I tore my hamstring. Ironman doesn't give you deferrals, and you only get into Kona once in your lifetime. So I went to Kona knowing full well that there was a time limit, that I couldn't run, but I had already calculated that if I walked fast, I could meet the time limit. So I did. I adapted because I had an objective. I wanted to complete that course. Now, clearly, I'm not going to win. Clearly, I'm not going to be competitive even with people in my age group. But it was an objective for myself personally.
That's amazing. And for the listeners, Kona obviously is like the Mount Everest for mountaineering. So you have to qualify. And as Jerry said, he was invited. And this is really an honor to be there. This is like the Olympics of the Ironman. How do you think the future will be for any races? Like when you think about New York City, so we have 50,000 participants. We probably have 10,000 volunteers who give out the water and in the aid tents. And then we have 2 million spectators along the road. So how will that happen?
Well, in the short term, I think most of these races will have to just recognize, as Boston has, I think Chicago is about to, or already has, I'm not sure. Those marathons have. They're just going to forego it and create some alternative, whether it's a virtual race or whatever. Realistically, as long as you have COVID virus that can cause people to be ill or even pass away, I don't think you're going to have anybody willing to run those races. Just from a business perspective, no one wants the liability. Even if you sign a waiver, and we always sign waivers for all these races anyway. Within a year or so, whether it's a vaccine or just the normal course of the virus fading away, we'll be back. But it's not going to happen right away. Right now, everybody's focused on the short term. Here we are in June, and normally at this point in time, people are beginning their training for the New York Marathon or have already begun. I can't imagine they can run the race effectively. If you spread out the 55,000 participants to have social distancing, you'd have to close the city for a couple of days. So, and that doesn't include the
That would be
spectators or the
Yeah.
volunteers and everything else that goes on. So it's wishful thinking that we're going to have a real race
I think so,
this year
yeah.
anyway.
Which of all your 56 races or even the 17 Ironman races, which one is the most memorable for you? I know you always have good stories.
I just mentioned Kona and knowing that, and I walked the marathon. It was the longest walk I've ever taken. And what I didn't realize is, just as a little side story, someone told me I should get a flashlight for my head. And I thought I needed it early in the morning as I got my bike ready before the race. And I didn't realize what they really meant was it gets dark early in Kona and there are no lights on the road. Most of the marathon, I was in pitch black. When you're walking at the back of the pack, you're by yourself in the dark.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. But I will say to your listeners, people who are runners who want to have a good time, my favorite marathons in the world was the Medoc Marathon. It's in Bordeaux, France. At the time, the year I did it, there were about 8,000 runners. Everyone is in full Mardi Gras costume. Everybody is drinking wine every half mile at a different chateau. It is the biggest party you've ever gone to. I have no idea whether the race course is the official 26.2 or 25.1 or 30. No one knows. No one cares. And that was a lot of fun for two reasons. One, it was a fun race. Not we were racing. We were just having a great time. And two, 11 of our running group called the Tuesday Night Pizza Running Group, a very big plus of being part of the athletic running community. Because it is a community and you build up friendships, not just for that one race, but for a lifetime. Some of my best friends over my lifetime are all in that group. Other races that have memories, years ago, they don't do it now, the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, early on in the late 80s, early 90s, the water stations weren't manned by volunteers. They were manned by Marines. And as they handed you the water, they said, "Water, sir." and a number of them ran the race with 50-pound backpacks.
Whoa.
I remember I got to the last, it's a 26.2 mile race. The last tenth of the mile of the race goes up to the Iwo Jima monument. I remember stopping at the bottom of the hill, and I looked at my wife and I said, "I'm done." And she said, "No, you're not." And it was probably the only time she ran. So that was memorable. One of the few times my wife has run up a hill.
With you. Wow.
With me, of course. Those are a couple of memorable places in the world.
And you mentioned the Tuesday Night Pizza Club, right? So how many years have we done that? So it's for the listeners, it's like running. We go to running class, we do some speed workout, we work hard, but then we also play hard. So there's always pizza and some wine or whatever.
Right, there's three, there are actually four elements.
Okay.
Element one is we do a workout of some sort, which typically runs from 45 minutes to an hour in Central Park. And we've recorded that the group has done, there are 22 people in the group. Not everybody runs every week. Small parts of the group run on different days. But the group as a total has done over 1,000 marathons, which is outstanding just by itself, all over the world. I've run with several of the group in Rome and Prague and Athens. We've had great times everywhere. So the first part of the evening is we run. And then when we get all sweated up, we go to a pizza place, and we have three parts to it. We have the pizza, we have the red wine, and whoever has traveled that week, wherever they've been, has to bring the chocolate. We've had some fantastic chocolates, and we've had some really, really pathetic ones, including the ones from Russia that were so bad. Oh my God! But I think someone went down the street and got some M&Ms that night
to compensate for the good chocolate.
To compensate for the Russian chocolates. But so it's become a tradition. It's been going on since, I think I have it correct, since 1997. So that would put it at what?
33 years, yeah. That's
a
long time of friendship. I remember I joined you. I met you and Susan, Martha, Lauren, and that was the beginning. I mean, I moved to New York. Then I instead of going to an English class, I went to running class. So I learned the real New York slang. This was my new family in New York when we had to line up for the marathon. So we would group up, and remember those old days? We had to send in a check. So nothing was electronic, apparently. So I thought that was also the fun part. And yeah, it's the camaraderie that we have. I think your wife at one point said, wow, you spend a lot of hours on a Saturday morning together. Wonder what you talk about. So I thought that was a fun comment and observation of her.
Well, that's because she doesn't know. And the reason she doesn't know what we talk about is the group has a saying, what is discussed in the loop, meaning the loop of Central Park, remains in the loop.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly confident that some of the confidences shared by members of the group have never
left Central Park.
Never left. Some would be quite interesting for newspapers, but for the most part, it's just life. I would point out the group has all kinds of professions. It's a full spectrum of life. It's really a rewarding relationship.
I would say
great relationship.
I mean, to me, I remember Tuesday and Saturdays, these were holy days, and it had to be really something good that you would do something else, right? So these are really memories that we keep in our hearts, the good times and the bad times. So just to end, I always ask people, what recommendations do you have? People who want to run, or, now these days we cannot run so much. I certainly would recommend you have to run with a mask. I do it. It's not comfortable, but we need to set an example. What tips do you have for beginners or people who want to start?
Like in everything, as I said earlier, in life, I believe in setting goals in life and in running, and doing it with a knowledge base of what are you doing? I mean, you could go out and just run, but there's more to it. So there's a lot of knowledge out there about how to begin, how to do it incrementally. So you don't just go running out there and do a distance too far that your body isn't adapted to, or too fast. Your goal is to adapt your body. If anybody who's listening wants to contact me, I'm more than happy to go through this, because as you adapt, that'll determine what you can do. And then you can enjoy what you're doing, knowing that you're not going to get injured. Because the worst thing to do is go out there, get injured, and then say, I can't do this sport. And most people, they go out there to run and they get injured, and then they go, oh, well, it hurt my knees, or it hurt my back. Or if you don't know what you're doing, then it's sort of like, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you nowhere. That's the result. There are books. There are a lot of people with knowledge these days. In my case, I wouldn't suggest anybody do an Ironman without having real knowledge about how to prepare and a preparation plan. I make sure, and I continue to train, even though there's no Ironman this year, it's been canceled. I continue to rest at least 1, if not 2 days a week. I continue to do a lot of easy workouts, and then only 1 or 2 hard workouts, maybe even not every week, but every other week. It's all about adaptation to the sport so that you can enjoy it. And certain sports like running require also that you have the right shoes. I mean, it's simple thing like that. And some people wear the shoes and the shoe looks great and it's worn out, and then they get injured. So, but all those things are out there in terms of knowledge to be gained from other people, or there's plenty of materials out there. Just go out and have a good time, but do it incrementally.
That's right. And certainly Jerry has a lot of knowledge. I learned tons of you, especially from the Ironman training and also training with you. So thank you so much, Jerry. And let's hope that there will be a next time in Lake Placid or in Kona, and that we all can compete again, because as we said, that's also the fun part of running. So thank you so much. This was really great listening to and learning from you.
Well, thank you, Susan. Good to talk to you again.
Always great to hear from Jerry. He has many more stories. Maybe we hear more from him. Take it from the Iron Woman. Get loopy. GetLoopy.com. Get 20% off your first order. Don't forget to order. And Monday and Wednesday, we have new podcasts coming out. Take it from the Iron Woman. Thank you so much for listening.